Okay, so you put your hand like this, thumb extended. Put it near your ear, and then you pull it across. And then you do the same thing like this. Okay, this is going to take a second. How's it going, everybody? It is your favorite apostates. Once again, I am McKay.
And I am Jordan.
And we're back for the third installment of the Endowment Ceremony. We've already spoken about the first two. I'm going to put little cards in here. Check them out to go see the first two because this will make no sense after having seen those.
After not having seen them.
Yeah, after not having seen them. And, if you've seen them, it probably doesn't really make any sense anyway, because it's kind of just a load of gibberish. That is the perfect descriptor of how I feel about that. I'm going to start this one off with a content warning. There will be some... I know this is not the content warning you were expecting, but there will be some descriptions of gore in this one. So if that's something that maybe makes you a little squeamish,
if blood makes you squeamish,
now is your time. Yeah, some of the names of things might be a little alarming to you. So just so we get that out there, you have been warned.
Now you're like, what the F, man?
I know. Now we've got your attention. So as we were saying, we reviewed the actual ceremony, and now in this one we wanted to talk about some of the changes that have been made, because there are some huge changes that have been made over the decades, and also some of the links to Freemasonry and the Endowment Ceremony and Joseph Smith, really, if we're going to be honest. So we're just going to dive into this. I want to start out with, because it's where everything originated, start out with Masons and then make our way back to the Masonry, because after we describe some of the changes, it will be a little more obvious what part Freemasonry played in the establishment of the Endowment Ceremony. So to start out, something to get out of the way, and this is from, we're reading out of a letter from my wife. This is verified knowledge. It's not like an expose or anything like that. But Joseph Smith Sr., the father of the prophet Joseph Smith,
who started the church,
was a documented member in upstate New York. He was raised to the degree of Master Mason on May 7th, 1818. Notably, 1818 is 2 years before Joseph Smith had his vision where God the Father and Jesus Christ or Moroni or an angel or any number of those versions appeared to Joseph and told him that all the sects were in the wrong and that the true church needed to be restored. So this is well before the whole grift started, really. So he was raised to Master Mason in Ontario, the Ontario Lodge number 23 of Canandaigua. I don't know.
We're Spanish. Really came out there.
Yeah, that was New York anyway. Joseph's older brother, Hiram, was also a member. He was a member of the Mount Moriah Lodge number 112 in Palmyra. Other prominent members include Joseph's other brothers, Samuel and William, Brigham Young,
the second president of the church.
Yeah, the second president of the church who led the saints out west. John Taylor,
the third president of the church.
Wilford Woodruff,
the fourth president of the church.
Lorenzo Snow,
the fifth president of the church.
Sidney Rigdon,
in the first presidency, not as important.
Yeah, in around the time of Joseph Smith. William Law,
also first presidency.
John those, I mean, they're apostles.
List goes on.
They're apostles. There's a long list. Other ones,
Porter
Orson
Rockwell.
Pratt. Oh, Porter Rockwell, the
Joseph Smith's bodyguard.
Yeah,
he was so cool to have a bodyguard, y'all.
Crazy dude.
You're related to him, aren't you?
No, not him.
I thought it was Rockwell.
Not Rockwell. It is...
it's another bodyguard.
What's his name?
I don't remember what we went to his
Shadrach Roundy.
Shadrach Roundy.
Sorry.
Right. Okay.
There
Sorry.
we go.
Side note.
So yeah, a lot of the founding people in the church, a lot of the people who signed their name as testimony of the Book of Mormon were all Masons. Kind of interesting. And this isn't going to be just like shitting on the Masons.
We have nothing
really
against Masons
Yeah.
or Freemasonry.
I mean, there's a lot of like patriarchy and stuff surrounding Freemasonry, but other than that, it's
We're simply trying to display that there is relations.
there's a lot going on there.
There's a circle happening.
Okay, so with all those relations established, there is a notable event in history in Nauvoo, Illinois. Straight from the History of the Church, Volume 4, it reads, 15th of March, 1842, I officiated as Grand Chaplain at the installation of the Nauvoo Lodge of Freemasons at the Grove near the temple. Grand Master Jonas of Columbus being present, a large number of people assembled on the occasion. The day was exceedingly fine. Okay, it was fine. All things were done in order, and universal satisfaction was manifested. This dude writes weird. In the evening, I received the first degree in Masonry in the Nauvoo Lodge, assembled in my general business office.
So he got endowed with the Masonry privileges.
Yep. March 1842. Notably, in the first installment of this series, I said May 5th, 1842. Right at the start of May, Joseph Smith instituted the endowment.
2
in
months.
The Red Brick store. Yeah, 7 weeks between him being initiated in the first degree Masonry to when he instituted the endowment. So that was an interesting point, and we will circle back around to that. But we want to talk about some of the changes that were made to the endowment, and then we will apply some of the knowledge of those changes to their connections with Masonry. In true Jordan and McKay fashion, we're going to go from some of the more minor changes that are like whatever to some of the most crazy shit that you wouldn't imagine going on in the Mormon temple, even after you've seen the endowment as it is in modern times. Some of these changes are kind of comical, and we want to go in depth on a couple of them. So just bear with us. We're going to be jumping around a little bit on dates. But that's just so we can convey some of the wonky ass shit that is changed.
My hair is weird.
You good?
Okay. So we talked about 1842. So that's fun. When they began the endowment, when he stole the endowment and claimed it as his own. And then there are lots of changes between the beginning of the endowment going down to now. I could sit here and talk to you about them for a very long time. And so to spare you of boredom, hopefully, I have written down the ones that are significant. So one of the most significant ones was in the 1970s, because in the endowment, the script, the film, there was reference to Satan being black. That's cool.
That's interesting. I think there's a coinciding event with that change. Possibly the fact that suddenly people who are black are now allowed to enter the temple.
There it is.
I don't think that has anything to do with it.
Same time frame. So in the 1970s, right around the time that they gave black people the priesthood after withholding it from them for basically ever, they removed the reference that Satan is black in the temple script. So
That's convenient.
that is no longer.
That God decided to change that right when he changed other things.
Exactly. As McKay said, we're going to jump around a bit, but I promise it's for good reason. So fast forward to 2019, and lo and behold, the Lord bestows revelation upon the prophets of the Mormon church and says, hey, guess what? You guys don't have to do this shit anymore, and I'm going to tell you to do something different. Okay. So they make some, what I would categorize now as minor changes, but as a member, I probably would have.
It would have been like earth-shattering.
Yeah. When the church makes changes like this to church ceremonies, they say it's because God is constantly evolving and pouring revelation upon their heads, okay? Makes it really convenient to make changes. So, 2019 comes, they make changes. You go to the endowment ceremony, you sit down, the first thing you hear is the following. Before beginning the session, they share a statement from the first presidency, which in summary says, since we've done this, occasional adjustments have been made. Prophets, seers, and revelators make these changes, right? Okay. Upon seeking the will of the Lord and after solemn prayer in the upper room of the Salt Lake Temple,
the place where many Mormons allege that the prophet and apostles meet with Jesus and Joseph Smith.
have seen Jesus, and Jesus comes down and speaks to them in the upper room of the Salt Lake Temple.
Even though other apostles allege that has never happened, but still, it's
they have
the
some
folklore.
There's some lost in translation things happening. So the Lord has again revealed inspired adjustments to the temple ceremonies. So these adjustments, which you will notice during your experience today, obviously, bring harmony to the way men and women make covenants with God. They deepen our understanding of his will and his relationships with his daughters and sons. Big caveat, as with everything that they do, these modifications do not affect the sacred and eternal covenants associated with the saving and exalting ordinances of the temple. As a reminder, due to the sacred nature of temple ordinances, the fact and content of these changes should not be discussed outside of the temple.
Oh, so I guess they don't want you to discuss anything outside the temple. So that's fun.
The biggest change in 2019 was kind of the reframing of women in the endowment script. So if hopefully you watched the 2 previous videos, you've seen how women are referred to in the script. So Eve is like a secondary character. Satan has more lines than Eve.
Oh, that's funny.
Fun fact. And she's kind of like a background human. She doesn't really talk. Adam does most of the talking for her. She doesn't really talk to God.
Yeah.
Adam talks on her behalf, and doesn't really give her really the opportunity to say anything. And the only other time that they really talk about her is when she partakes of the fruit first, and they shit on her for doing it first.
Yeah. I think if you're watching it, basically after they leave the garden, she doesn't say. I think she has one line, maybe.
So,
and that's like probably the longest bit of the video.
And you remember that anytime during any of the covenants that are made in the temple, women hearken unto their husbands and covenant unto their husbands, and their husbands then covenant with God, right? So women are not directly covenanting. That just does not sound right. With God. The clarification in these changes is that anytime in any of the covenants where the sisters covenanted to their husbands, that has been changed. So the example being, sisters even watched and pronounced clean and anointed to become hereafter queens and priestesses in the new and everlasting covenant. So instead of unto your husbands,
queens and priestesses to your husbands, they took the to your husbands out.
So that's gone. That is no more. And then all conversations between Adam and Eve and God, and when Adam's talking, she still obviously doesn't talk as much as Adam because, God forbid. But when Adam does talk, instead of just talking about himself, he says we instead of just I, or I, Adam, am looking for messengers from the Lord. It's we are looking for messengers from the Lord. So it is more inclusive language. And then one of the biggest other things that I think a lot of people have confusion over, that you guys probably maybe noticed in the temple videos, is when Satan, after they've partaken of the fruit, Satan comes back and Lucifer's like, yes, you're beginning to see things already because you ate the fruit, blah, blah, blah. And Adam says, what is the apron you have on? Right? He's wearing an apron. And Satan says, it is an emblem of my power and priesthoods. So both of those, the question Adam asks about what is the apron, gone. Lucifer asks, it's an emblem of my power and priesthood, also gone. Now this makes sense in terms of priesthoods, because I think for a lot of people it is confusing because Satan has been cast out and does not have
priesthood power.
So the fact that he would say that he has some type of priesthood is very confusing. So it makes sense why they got rid of it. And then the apron thing is something that we're going to return to in a moment. Other thing pertaining to women, which a lot of people feel like is the most like gross part of the ceremony, is if you watched it, you remember that women have to veil their faces during the true order of prayer, which is the only time that you have to veil your face during that ceremony. Women no longer veil their faces ever at all in the ceremony. Veiling faces are no longer. And so the veils kind of at this point are kind of pointless. They don't really do anything. You don't veil your faces anymore.
Yeah,
so,
not even during the wedding or the sealing or anything like that.
Nope.
So kind of weird.
It is kind of weird. So you still wear the veil. You just don't veil your face.
But notably, I do not know a single woman that has ever not complained about having to put the veil over their face. My own mom did. You'd brought it up to me. Yeah. It's kind of suffocating. And honestly, when us dudes get to breathe freely, I mean,
it's
pre-COVID is a little different. Yeah.
I mean, the dudes look around with all the women's faces veiled, and it's just kind of, I mean, the whole thing is culty, but it just adds
it seems really misogynistic.
It is.
Yeah.
So, and then the last thing, there was some things eliminated kind of to move things along quicker. Some of the repetition is gone, not all of it, but some of it. And then notably, you do not have to change shoulders with your robes, which furthers the ordinance along a lot quicker, because you don't have to stand up and change everything from one side to the other in the middle of the ceremony.
Yeah. New Name Noah does a video where he has all of the changes in the script. He shows what it used to be alongside with if there was a change. He will put it also in the text, so you can watch that if you want. Really, it's not that groundbreaking, a lot of the stuff. The only notable stuff really Jordan just shared right now. Other than that, it's like really small verbiage changes. And
here, how do I say this nicely?
Here we go.
As a progressive Mormon woman, when I was in the church, I identified as a feminist. I was what I felt like was a very passionate feminist, and the subservient women thing always bothered me. And so had I still been in the church, like, and going to endowment ceremonies when this change was made, I probably would have thought it was groundbreaking for me.
I think so. Even
though it seems kind of minor, because here's what the church tends to do. The church knows that the majority, and maybe not the majority, a lot of women in the church feel like there's this slight towards women. In a lot of things, women can't hold the priesthood. Women can't, perform ordinances. Women can't, put their hands on people's heads and cast into them the power of the Lord. Like, women can't do any of those things. And so every once in a while, the church will throw women a crumb.
Just to string you along.
And they're like, here's this really stupid thing that literally doesn't mean jack shit, but because you're so deeply entrenched in the church, you're like, oh my God, the changes are coming. The Lord is speaking, the church members are listening, and women are being endowed with more power. This tracks with the changes. I don't know if it was 2019 or if it was before then, when they announced that women could be witnesses for baptisms. If you haven't watched our baptisms for the dead video, go watch it, because notably during the baptisms for the dead, you have to have witnesses, right? And let me emphasize this for you so you understand and how important this is. Witnesses don't do anything.
They just look.
They just sit there and look.
And if it's wrong, literally anybody could do it.
But
it is
women,
not special.
Women couldn't do it. Women couldn't serve as witnesses. So I don't know when that made that change.
It was sometime between when we got married and now, I think.
So they made a change and said women can serve as witnesses. You know how demeaning that is? To be like, you know what, women, we love you so much and find you so useful that we're going to allow you to sit your ass in a chair and watch what happens.
Yeah. That's what qualifies as progressivism in the Mormon church. And mind you, this is everything that has occurred up to now, the primitive church, as they say in the Articles of Faith, it literally took 4,000 years to get to the bare-ass fucking minimum. That is not progressivism. 4,000 years.
Well, and a lot of women would argue that things have kind of gone backwards. Women used to be able to give blessings.
Oh, yeah, that's
Women
true.
used to be able to do these things. Like in Joseph Smith's time, they were a lot more
forward thinking.
They were a lot more forward thinking, and I feel like they gave women more than breadcrumbs, and women kicked ass and knew what to do with it.
And then they took it all away.
And then we went backwards. So this is kind of what they do. So these changes, not having to veil your face, Eve not being a background character, like these changes might seem minor to you, but to a lot of Mormon women, especially progmos, this is progressive Mormons, this is like makes it so nice. Like a news article came out after these changes were made where the Salt Lake Tribune like interviewed a few women who had just participated, and they were like, I am just enlightened by these changes, and they interviewed men who were like, my heart is just bursting for the sisters. You guys, come on. So that's the bulk of the 2019 changes.
Yeah. Like I said, if you are interested in seeing more on that, you can go over to New Name Noah's channel. We'll probably link it in the description. So let's head on back to 1990. There were some really big changes.
The church starts getting wind of some awkwardness that the members feel about the endowment ceremony as it was prior to 1990. And so they consider it might be time to make some changes. So they send out a survey to church members at the time and ask their opinions about certain things in the endowment. And that feedback led them to make a number of changes.
Some of them very big.
Yes. The changes in 1990 were intense. There were a lot of changes. There were also some minor things. Ironically, now that you know, and you've watched the endowment ceremony, and you know the absolute redundant language that is involved, in 1990 they made some changes for brevity's sake, which is just,
can you imagine,
hilarious, right? Because it's worse than it was now. Can you imagine? So that's one of the things. More talk at the veil that talked about more things at the end of the endowment ceremony was taken out. More harsh language about Eve being at fault is dropped. And that notably in the 2019 changes, I don't know if I talked about this or not, but they did take more of the burden off of Eve as well. It was more of a recognition of the fact that she was following God's commandment and therefore had to partake, instead of Eve, you bitch.
You stupid idiot.
Where Adam just is like, Eve did it first, so they've lessened that a little bit. And they lessened that a little bit in 1992.
He just blames it on his wife. Little baby.
It's Mormons, man. And then that's kind of it. There was some other language things that were eliminated. There were some other like minor things around Satan that were eliminated, but those are the minor things. The major changes are the ones that you're not ready for.
We're going to go into some of the major changes. The first one, I think, is the funniest one that we need to explain to you. So this one was one of the 1990 changes. And like I said, these went into effect in April 1990, I think at the start of the month. And we both have family members who did these things before 1990. So that'll be an interesting conversation if we ever get to have that with them.
Makes things really awkward now that you know that.
Now that you know that. The first one that I think is just absolutely hilarious, and there's some linked things that we need to talk about. Remember when everybody put their hands way over their head and they said, "Oh God, hear the words of my mouth," 3 times repeated,
chanted over an altar.
Yeah. So that was actually worse at one point. Originally, when it was like instituted, people would put their hands high above their head, and instead of saying, "Oh God, hear the words of my mouth," they would say, "Pele Ale." And they would do that 3 times repeated. So the explanation of this and why they say, oh, this means, oh God, hear the words of my mouth, is because Pele'el is, oh God, hear the words of my mouth in the pure Adamic language. And maybe you've heard of it, but I guarantee what you've heard is not what I'm referring to. What I'm referring to is the pure Adamic language according to expert linguist and translator Joseph Smith, who in one instance was asked, what is the pure language of God? And they said, oh yeah, it's the Adamic language. So the people asked him, what is the name of God in pure language? And he said, Amen. Okay. What's the name of the Son of God? If that's the name of God, Joseph, and he says, the Son, Amen. I don't know about you, but that sounds like English to me. And then they said, Joseph, what are angels called in pure language? Amen, Engelsman. Like, this
dude did not study.
This dude was not an expert. There's no way that if there were gold plates that he actually translated those. He came up with this shit on the spot, and it shows.
Honestly.
So, there you go. Pele in the pure Adamic language. It is.
That's something.
That's bad. So that one's funny, but here's where the content warning comes in. So just as a review, there are 4 tokens of the priesthood. So there's the 2 tokens of the Aaronic priesthood and the 2 tokens of the Melchizedek priesthood, the lesser and the greater, respectively. Each token, which is the little handshake, has a name and a sign associated with it. The first one being the new name, the second one being the given name, your given first name, the third one being the son, and then the fourth one being the really long one. Before 1990, each token was not only accompanied by a name and a sign, it was also accompanied by a penalty. And this is why, oh God.
I'm you.
Whoopsie. So this is also plays a big part into why people don't talk about the temple outside of the temple, because this shit is scary. Honestly, I'm not going to lie. It is freaky. So with each token that they teach you, they would also teach you the accompanying penalty that would go with it. So more or less, and it's weird too, there's only 3. The fourth one doesn't have a penalty. So there's 3 of them. Each time they instruct you what the token is, the name, and then the covenant associated with it. When they would teach you the covenant, they would also tell you the covenant of the penalty and then the sign of the penalty. So each time...
Because that wasn't complicated enough.
I know. It way more complicated. So each time they would explain to you that you and each of you covenant not to reveal the token of whatever priesthood, lest so rather than reveal the token of the priesthood, they would suffer a penalty. And I'm going to go through each of them so it just kind of makes sense, but each of it is kind of modeled like that. So the first token of the Aaronic priesthood, the sign is like this. I'm mirroring it so it's a little more in frame. You'd put your hand up to the square with the thumb extended. This is important because the thumb extended also applies to the execution of the penalty, where you would put the thumb to your ear and drag it across your throat to the other ear and drop it down to the side. So the significance of this is that your throat be cut from ear to ear and your tongue be torn out by its roots.
Mind you, this is the penalty if you reveal any of these things.
Yes. So that is the first penalty of the first token of the Aaronic priesthood. The second penalty of the second token of or the penalty of the second token of the Aaronic priesthood is, well, here's the sign first. You have your arm to the square. This one's right, but, and then you have your
cupping shape
hand in a cup like that, right? So the execution of the sign is you take the cup across your chest and then you drag it across your chest and drop your hands to the ground. This is how I'm best given to understand it because this was taken out before I was even born. But the significance of that is that your breast be torn open, your heart and vitals be torn out, and given to the birds and the beasts of the field. So that's excellent. And then the penalty associated with the first token of the Melchizedek priesthood, or sign of the nail, the sign of that token is like this, where you have your left hand cupped like this, and the right hand down with the fingers together and the thumb extended. Remember that? Kind of like this. You would cross them with the right hand over, and you can't really see it, but you would slit your hand this way, and your hand would come out this way. And the penalty associated with that motion was your body be cut asunder and your bowels gush out. So those are pretty intense penalties to be associated with these things. And this is, you're covenanting to do these things if you were to ever or before you ever reveal the tokens of the priesthood.
So this is what was supposed to happen to us before we revealed all those things to you.
Yes.
So basically you're catching your guts with your cupped hand.
So that was taken out for pretty obvious reasons because it is very extreme. But it's also important to note that they are still hidden in those signs. You still put your arm to the square with your hand like you would be slitting your throat. You still make a little cup like it would be slashing your chest, and you still put your hand face down like you would slice your bowels open. So it's still there. It's just they don't talk about it anymore. Notably, John Sweeney of the BBC interviewed Jeffrey R. Holland, one of the second top ones on the shit list of apostles, and he had this to say.
Let's talk about Mitt Romney.
Okay.
The man who may well become the most powerful man on earth.
Mm-hmm.
As a Mormon in the temple, I've been told, he would have sworn an oath to say that he would not pass on what happens in the temple, lest he slit his throat. Is that true?
That's not true. That's not true. We do not have penalties in the temple.
You used to.
We used to.
Therefore, he swore an oath saying, I will not tell anyone about the secrets here, lest I slit my throat.
Well, the vow that was made was regarding the ordinance of the temple.
Potentially, the most powerful man in the world has sworn an oath, which he meant at the time, whatever it is now, that he must not tell anyone about what he's seen, lest he slit his throat.
That he would not tell anyone about his personal pledge to the Lord.
So that was in reference to
Backward.
Mitt Romney doing this, and he bold-faced said no,
Lie.
which is a lie, and then he kind of repaired it and said, we used to, but we don't. But yes, Mitt Romney still did that.
Mitt Romney
When he was
did
in
it.
when he was in the temple, Mitt Romney did that.
There is a video about Mitt Romney coming, so get excited.
yeah, we want to talk about that. Whoa. Okay, hold up. How's it going, everybody? It's McKay from the future. I just wanted to jump in here and make a quick correction. I misread the information, and obviously all of this shit was taken out before I was even born, like I mentioned just a second ago. The graphic language that we have just described was not in the temple ceremony when Mitt Romney, at 1990, when they took the penalties out. The graphic language was actually removed in the late 1920s and was replaced with a much more brief, rather than do so, I would suffer my life be taken. So everything with the hand motions was still the same. They just did not explain the really graphic shit. But I mean, you're still saying that you're going to take your own life before you take before these things happen. Also, it is worth noting that not a single person has ever notably committed suicide or been killed before they revealed the secrets of the temple. Interesting. Anyway, I'll let you get back to it. Thanks. So that is the penalties. A lot of people refer them as the blood oaths, which is also a fun little way to reference them as. That one's really bad. There's also another one that is just exceptionally bad. This one was removed in the 1930s after there was a little commission from the prophet to revise portions of the endowment ceremony. This was also brought up in a hearing in 1904. There were hearings for Reed Smoot, who was elected by Utah citizens to be a senator, a U.S. senator. The whole governing body as a whole was skeptical because of the practice of polygamy that was still going on in Utah, despite there being
on the DL,
despite there being
there was an agreement.
Yes.
There was a manifesto that said no more polygamy in 1890. Yeah. So anything after that was being practiced on the DL.
So there was this going on. They were investigating into his possible links with polygamy. Notably, there was a second manifesto that went out that said, yo, everybody quit it because statehood was on the line and this guy was going to not be able to be in the Senate. Anyway, this is the Oath of Vengeance, which originated in 1845, a year after Joseph was killed at Carthage jail. Joseph Smith, yeah, for being a treasonous douchebag who ordered a printing press being destroyed because it was exposing him on being a polygamist during his presidential run.
And that was the least of the shitty things.
That was the least of the shitty things, but it's the most notable that led to his death. Anyway, Brigham Young instituted the Oath of Vengeance in 1845, and this...
Mind you, Brigham Young was the president at the time. He took over the church from Joseph.
So he was directing people to do this, and I can see why, because literally their prophet was slain. I don't know where in the ceremony this would have been introduced. It was 1845, and it was done by the 1930s, long before literally any of us were around. So the oath participants would repeat as follows: you and each of you do covenant and promise that you will pray and never cease to pray to Almighty God to avenge the blood of the prophets upon this nation, the United States, and that you will teach your children and teach the same to your children and to your children's children unto the third and fourth generation.
Avenge the blood of the prophet.
Literally.
Sounds very religiously symbolic, doesn't it?
Yeah, and sounds really patriotic. So I find it very ironic that a lot of Mormons are like overly patriotic when literally a couple generations ago, their forefathers were swearing to avenge the blood of the prophet upon this nation. So
they were bitter about that.
Can you tell? Yeah.
And mind you,
maybe it's because Joseph Smith violated Bill of Rights amendments, but whatever, you know.
Mind you, this is not craziness coming from Brigham Young, because Brigham Young was also a huge believer in blood atonement.
Yeah, this also kind of relates to that, but that's kind of a deep topic to get into another day. Also, before there was the manufactured by the church garments, the garment used to be just any undergarment that you could find. And during the ceremony in the endowment, they would cut the symbols into the fabric. There were a lot of reports, and this is written in Fawn Brody's No Man Knows My History, that people, when they would have the knee symbol cut into the garment, oftentimes they would have their skin cut and the symbol scarred into their knee. that every knee shall bow and every tongue confess that Jesus is the Christ. So that is kind of freaky too, but definitely not the worst of the things. So those are some of the most notable changes that have gone on over the decades. And if you're like me, I was really shocked to find out this stuff. They don't talk about this, obviously, because of the blood oaths. You weren't supposed, under penalty of death, not supposed to talk about this shit. So when they make changes like that, they are lost to history. People don't talk about the things that they used to do. Any of this stuff, we had no idea was going on in the temple until we left the church and found out for ourselves what they used to do.
They definitely don't teach you this. They don't, just like we talked about with the endowment before, you don't get instructed on what's going to happen. You don't get instructed on the history of the endowment. Really, you don't. If you want to do those things yourself, you can. But there's no church material that's going to be presented to you talking about the evolving of the endowment over time. And so this is not something that you would ever know or encounter as a true blue Mormon who just sticks to church material and doesn't stray from it.
Yeah.
So,
and like I said, I have family members who did this, who went through the temple with me for the first time, and not a single soul mentioned what it used to be like.
And mind you, I think we addressed this in the Initiatories video, but we said we were going to address it more now.
Yeah.
Same thing with the Initiatories, gross changes that nobody would have told you about. You used to be nude when they did that stuff to you. We have a video on that if you want to watch it.
Yeah.
But that's also evolved over time. So it seems like the sketchy things that people are like, you know what? This is kind of gross. This random person in the temple is touching me with oil and anointing me near my swimsuit regions.
My bathing suit region.
And I'm really not chill with that. And then, adding the little poncho to make you feel better.
Yeah.
Even McKay had the poncho to cover you up so you don't feel so nude. I never got the poncho.
I just had my garmies underneath, but I mean, it used to be free balling under there.
And I didn't even have that. I was wearing a dress during my initiatory. So it just goes to show you, between the time that McKay went and the time that I went, weren't that far apart, but there were drastic changes just between now and then.
All right, shall we move on to the Masonry bit?
Yes.
Let's move on to the Masonry bit. We're going to revisit that. The first one I want to revisit is one that we already kind of mentioned. In the temple, the video that you saw that has now been removed, they ask Lucifer, what is that apron you're wearing? And he says, that is a symbol of my power and priesthoods. Now, in that video, they don't show the apron at all, and in any of the videos that I've seen, they don't either. But that was added in, and I'm assuming this was when the Mormons came to the Salt Lake Valley, because there was a lot of contention between the Masons and the Mormons, not allowing them to join in the lodges or anything like that for a good amount of time. Even though Brigham Young was already a Mason, there was a lot of Masons already in, but they weren't allowed to join any of these lodges because a lot of the local lodges in Nevada, Colorado, and Montana, they had heard about the Mormons and about things that Joseph Smith had done, and they were like, no. Anyway, so probably based out of contention with the Masons and the Mormons at the time, they Satan in the temple had a apron on, and I'll throw a little, this is an old ass little expose drawing of it, but the markings on the apron were pretty obvious that it was a reference to Masonry. So they were trying to vilify the Masons after
dunk on the Masons.
So many of them had been Masons for so long, and there are a lot of Mormon Masons even today, which is kind of weird.
We've talked to a few of them.
Anyway, yeah, we've spoken to a few of them, and they were kind of the people who let me in on that idea. It'd be pretty hard to find otherwise. So anyway, there are a lot of similarities between the LDS endowment ceremony and various Masonic rituals. And again, this is not like us shitting on Freemasonry. As far as I'm concerned, there's not anything inherently bad about Masonry.
As far as I'm concerned, Joseph Smith saw this shit, took it like
And
put his
ran
little
with it.
spit on it and then
Yeah.
gave it to people. And apparently, because he can't have an original idea. So if anything, Joseph Smith
Yeah.
ripped off half this shit from the Masons.
And I will let you be the judges for yourself. I will say it's an interpolation, just like Good For You by Olivia Rodrigo is an interpolation of Misery Business by Paramore. Deeply inspired. But there's a lot of shit. Okay, number one, and we're reading these out of Letter for My Wife. You can find it at letterformywife.com and read up more on these similarities. And these are not even by any means all of the similarities that there are. We talked about the compass and the square that are in the garments and on the veil.
On your garmies.
Yeah. In the Masonic, in a Masonic ritual, some of the instructions read, and I quote, "The candidate then enters the senior deacon at the same time, pressing his left breast to the point of the compass as he enters. The angle of the square is pressed against his right breast." And like we said, they have the
Sign of
point
the
of the compass in the left breast and the angle of the square in the right breast.
Weird.
So that's kind of weird that is exactly the same. I don't know.
Bizarre.
You be the judge. There is also a washing and anointing ceremony that the Masons do. In the script it says, "Master orders the basin of the perfumed water and clean napkin to be brought to him and directs candidates to wash his hands," which he does. Master takes a box of perfumed ointment and anoints candidate on his head, eyes, mouth, heart, the tip of his right ear, hand, and foot. That sounds kind of like the same thing, but just added on to it and then saying that it's just like in Kings.
If you watched
Anyway.
our initiatory video, then everything we just
Yeah.
said to you sounds probably
Pretty familiar.
familiar to you.
But wait, the similarities don't stop there. In the Masonic presentation of a new name, I also present you with a new name. It is blank.
Wait, Masons get new names?
Oh, so that's not an original thing either. That's interesting.
Tokens!
Oh, the tokens. Yeah, that's not original either. I'm going to throw these ones up on the screen. Sorry for the listeners, but I will describe them to you, and you judge for yourself. Let's say we're going to do a token, right? I'm going to put the knuckle of my thumb over the first knuckle of another person, and they're going to do the same to me. Is that a Mormon token or is that a Masonic token? Trick question. It's both. The first and second tokens of the Aaronic priesthood are the same as the first, the Masonic entered apprentice grip and the Masonic grip of a
Real
fellow
grip.
craft, a real grip of a fellow craft. And these are terms I am not familiar with. We are
The
not
handshakes
Masons, so-
are the same.
exactly
They're
the same. I can't even say it's an interpolation. It's the exact same. So that's fun. The sign's not even different either. Masonic sign of the Master Mason. You raise both hands and arms above to the elbows, perpendicular one side on the head, forming a square. This looks a little pale-ish, if you ask me. So that's interesting.
Basically the same. The wording's a little jumbled, but it's basically the same.
Yeah. So, and it looks like in older iterations, the sign is made by bringing both hands to the square, palms to the front, which has been changed. It's just raising hands high above the head. So it used to be even more similar than it is now.
And then the awkward part
Here we go. Yeah.
where you're hugging a stranger.
The embrace through the veil with aprons. Okay. So another part that was removed in 1990 is the 5 points of fellowship. So when you were at the veil, when you stick your hand through the veil and the Lord sticks his hand through the veil, there was an extra part when you would receive the second, the sign or the name of the second token of the Melchizedek priesthood, you would do the 5 points of fellowship through the veil with the Lord.
The 5 points of fellowship is the Masonic term.
Nope, it's the 5 points of fellowship.
Oh, it is on both?
Yeah. Wrong.
Oh my gosh.
It's the same.
It's literally the same.
So Peter would instruct you and say the 5 points of fellowship are inside of the right foot, by the side of the right foot, knee to knee, breast to breast, hand to back, and mouth to ear. From the words of the worshipful master, the 5 points of fellowship are foot to foot, knee to knee, breast to breast, hand to mouth, and cheek to cheek or mouth to ear.
They're the same. Other than like
Verbatim.
one line.
The same.
No, there's a cheek in there.
Oh, cheek to cheek or mouth to ear. Yeah, you say both. So you just take one thing out and it's different suddenly.
It's like homework.
Literally.
Like my students.
Just
they would like
change it,
copy
but
each
don't
other
make it
and they
too
would
obvious.
change like one thing. It's like, I know what you're doing.
Yeah, literally. And not only that, the similarities of the 5 points of fellowship, the master and the candidate would be holding each other by the grip, and the master would say, "What is this?" A grip. A grip of what? The grip of an entered apprentice mason. Has it a name? It has. Will you give it to me? I did not so receive it, neither can I so impart it.
You guys, when we read this stuff for the first time, we were absolutely flabbergasted. Like this was one of the biggest things for me after we left that was a point of real frustration, because if you watch those videos before this, you know, it's the same thing. What is that? The second token of the Melchizedek priesthood. Has it a name? It has. Will you give it to me? I cannot, for I have not yet received it. It's practically identical. Practically.
So that was funny.
That was
It was
shattering
so
to us.
frustrating that this is literally like the pinnacle of Mormonism. We use that term a lot. It has to be the only thing on the planet Earth that is, there's no way that this could be corrupted and in any other thing. But guess what? We were fucking wrong on that. So that's not even where the similarities end. Penalties. This is why I wanted to circle back around after talking about penalties, because not even those are original. And we clowned on those pretty hard and say those are pretty fucked up. And I don't know about Masons. Do as you please, but yeah. I will just read the first one, because they're all pretty much the same. So the Masonic penalty sign, made from the Dewguard, which is made from the sign, by dropping the left hand carelessly, at the same time raise the right arm and draw the hand still open across the throat, thumb next to the throat, and drop the hand perpendicular to the side.
Now the Mormon one.
In executing the sign of the penalty, right hand, palm downward, is drawn sharply across the throat and then dropped square to the side. Literally. What? Are you kidding me? Plagiarized.
And that goes for all of the penalties. They're all worded. They're all just rewordings of the Masonic penalties.
Yeah. I'm also, this one is up for debate because Masonic symbols aren't really, other than like the square and the compass, are not really that like unique. As some of them are.
The all-seeing eye.
The all-seeing eye.
There is an all-seeing eye
Yeah.
on the Salt Lake Temple.
Yep. There's a lot of this shit that is like on the temples. And
That's
everything
weird
like
though,
this.
because the church is like huge on the occult and all of those things being bad and witchcraft and all.
I think a lot of that comes from the Satanic Panic, though.
It could be, but it's interesting because those things are literally on the temple.
Yeah. Yeah, so you see in the Nauvoo Temple, I always thought it was really weird that they had this
Eastern
pentagram.
Star.
And I was like, that's a satanic symbol, but like obviously it's a Masonic symbol, the Order of the Eastern Star. So there's that. Also the sun, moon, and the stars. Really big imagery in Mormonism, and it coincides with the 3 degrees of glory, the celestial glory being that of the sun, the terrestrial glory being that of the moon, and the telestial glory being that of the stars. So
those are also on the Salt Lake Temple.
Also on the Salt Lake Temple. It's
weird.
It's all bad, honestly. There's a lot of apologist theory, for lack of a better word, where they kind of try to explain these very stark similarities away with, the Masons originated at the Temple of Solomon and it became corrupt during times of apostasy, and Joseph Smith restored it. There is
really
not any evidence that says that they were around for the
Temple
of Solomon. And there's maybe, and if I'm wrong, somebody can prove me wrong, but that is like the weakest apologetics that I've ever heard in my entire life. It was restored by him, but it's basically the same thing. So you're saying that they have they know the signs and tokens. They just don't have the priesthood power to.
I'm thinking of like the Mean Girls meme, so you're saying that it was ripped off from the Masons.
Yeah.
Hello.
Basically.
Hello.
Is anybody home? Hello.
What is happening?
Hello. This was so frustrating. And if any of the other, we've got a lot of other ex-Mormons in the comments a lot of times. So leave a comment if this was equally frustrating for you to learn, because it's stupid how close that they actually are. And this was a huge part of me being a missionary and a huge component to us getting married and everything like that. So it's not some little thing for you to find out that it's literally just all horse shit.
Joseph Smith wasn't original enough to create something himself.
No, and he is not known for being original in any sense of the word.
He's not the brightest.
For that. Somebody asked why it was such a big thing for you to receive your endowment before you were a missionary. And like I said in the first video, this is viewed as a gift of power and a protection. So you are literally like initiated into this order of the priesthood and things like that to be like under God's watchful eye at all times. Like the garment is supposed to be a protection, and there's so much folklore and stuff associated with having this gift that when it's defiled or things like that, it's almost like you are putting yourself in danger, spiritual and physical and otherwise. So it's a huge deal for the missionaries to have this, for you to get it before you get married and everything, because the rhetoric surrounding it is just that it is so important.
But also think of it in terms of Mormonism is particularly thoughtful, I'll say, about things, right? So in order to, you got to look at the order of things. You have to have the endowment in order to go on a mission. If you don't, you can't go on a mission.
Yeah.
You have to have the endowment before you get married. If you don't, you can't get married. And so even after you go through the endowment and you're like, dude, that shit was weird, it's already happened to you, one, and you know that you wouldn't have been able to do those things without it. And so at that point, it's already happened to you, and you're like, okay. And if you did know that was going to happen, it would stand in the way of the things that you were trying to do. So that's just, they do that on purpose.
Yeah.
It's absolutely on purpose, because you want to get the endowment because it gives you access to the things that you need to do. And so it's purposeful in the way that it's orchestrated.
Totally. And this is not even like touching on people not sharing these things outside of the temple. I did not dare reveal my new name to Jordan until after we left the church, because I was so scared of what might happen, because we were told you don't reveal it under no penalty too. Like, at one point, you were under the penalty of slitting your own throat before you revealed your new name. Are you going to tell me that people, after they do that, before they didn't even consent to knowing this information, but as soon as they do, they're told that before they reveal it to the outside world, they'd rather slit their throat?
It's the power of indoctrination, folks.
That is the fear of God to an extreme, that they will not say these things. And I can't imagine what it was like for a lot of these early people who left the church, and there was no leaving the church. You were excommunicated, and it was very public. They would announce it in general conference.
They would put it in the paper.
Whole church. Yeah, they would put it in the paper. Everybody knew you were excommunicated, so you could be essentially exiled from society. And people would leave, and this is what they had staring them in the face, that before that this shit would happen, God would not be mocked, and if you were going to be mocked, you would be mutilated, basically. you would be mutilated before you would share any of these things. Just bonkers. Oh, before we go, we had received a couple people asking us about the ceremonial clothing. I was thinking of maybe doing some stuff on the significance of that, but I think I might just link our TikToks to it because it's not that deep. Anyway, some people had also asked us about getting buried in the ceremonial clothing, which is something you do. So you get married in the same clothes that you're going to be buried in, which is fun to think about.
It's really awkward. You know what? Yeah. I did not think about that until after we left the church because
it's weird.
Mormon me. But I look at it now and what I've had Mormon family members that have died and they're dressed in these weird ass clothes.
Yeah.
And so even if they have a viewing, even if they do a viewing open casket, they will be dressed in these clothes typically. And they'll push that green apron down there, but it's there.
Yeah, it's there. It's also funny because in that process, in order to dress your deceased loved one in that garb, you have to it's in the handbook that you have to be, the people who dress them in those clothes have to be endowed.
They have had to go through the ceremony.
Same gender. So for instance, when my father passes away, I will not be able to be there to dress him, which is something that I think is kind of odd anyway, but I won't be able to do that because I am an apostate and I would be touching the sacred temple ceremonial clothes. So that's fun. But it's really kind of morbid to think about that
it's gross.
Get married in the same clothes.
Other people don't get married in the same clothes that they die in. That's just...
It's kind of like that scene in The Office where Dwight and Angela, spoiler alert, but if you haven't seen it by this now, I don't know what to tell you. Dwight and Angela get married in their own graves.
Standing in their own
kind of
grave.
the same idea where it's like morbidly romantic in a culty way.
Morbidly romantic in a culty way.
Uh-oh, that's going to be a sticker.
Oh my God.
So anyway...
Oh God. That brings me to our next point because we've gotten a lot of questions about the marriage ceremony within Mormonism. So and we wanted to do this in order. So you have the initiatory rite that came first, well, technically baptism, initiatory, the endowment, which we further clarified in this video. The following video, the next video that we do of the In the Temple series will be the Mormon marriage ceremony, which is called the sealing. So we will do a video covering the sealing, which is the actual marriage ceremony in and of itself. But you can't really understand what happens in the sealing until you have the endowment. So that's why we wanted to start here first. And then the second thing that we've gotten a few comments on the last video, and I've gotten a few questions about it on Instagram, is what's the second anointing?
Which is another thing that we'll have to...
That's another ordinance that we're going to talk about. So... I will just say the second anointing broke my shelf. The second anointing was it for me. It broke my heart in two. So we will talk about the second anointing. It's an elite ordinance that not everyone gets. So we'll talk about that. So that will be upcoming.
So this one was a little bit shorter, not by much, but but thanks for everybody for sticking around on this 3-part installment mini series in our larger temple series. Like Jordan said, we are going to continue on with the sealing and finally the second anointing. That one, don't even try to ask Mormons about, because a lot of them don't even know about it. So we'll explain a little bit more on that. We're going to have to do some reviewing on that, because there's not a lot of information on that one. So luckily we'll have a little time before then. If you have enjoyed this, make sure to subscribe. Hit the like
lot
button.
of you watch. I'm gonna go on a little tangent here. I love all you humans. I truly do. But I looked at our analytics today, and 70% of you who watch our shit are not subscribed. Come on.
Please consider subscribing.
Hello. Please subscribe.
We would love you even more if you subscribed. And
we still love you, but we'd love you more.
Yeah. All of our subscribers are amazing. We would love you even a degree more if you became one of our fabulous patrons. Over the weekend, we hit 100 patrons. I can't believe that there's 100 people who value what we have to say enough that they're like, yes, keep doing it. Here's a little bit of little monetary appreciation for what you do.
Y'all help financially support us, and that is much appreciated.
Let me explain to you the crushing imposter syndrome that I feel whenever I look at the Patreon. So I want to thank all of you very much. If you're listening and you want to find the Patreon, it's patreon.com/Jordan and McKay.
It's also linked in the info box.
In the description. If you so please, if you'd like to see some of our other stuff, I mentioned on TikTok, we have some videos explaining the ceremonial clothing. You can follow us there, and on Instagram you can find us at Jordan and McKay.
Follow us on Instagram. That's where you will get top tier information about what we're doing, and you get to
since the last video people were interested in the kitty. I think we're going to be uploading some kitty content, because she's the most social that she's ever been since we've lived here. So that's
she's very
awesome.
cute. If you watched our last video, you heard her very emphatically expressing her opinion as an LGBTQ plus ally. So go check out that video if you haven't already.
She's a cutie. Also, keep an eye on our t-shirt store, because I have a design on the way that you may have seen before, and you might be interested in it if you enjoy my shirts that I wear on the reg. So keep an eye out for
band
that.
tees.
Also, we have our Etsy store, Happy Brain Collective, if you want some stickers that we have designed.
We hand wrap them and ship them and send them to you.
Yes, and they are the highest quality. We used to make them ourselves. We get them done through Sticker Mule. They are choice quality. If you have stuck around this long, again, thank you very much. We love you, and we will see you next time.